Okay, let's begin. All right, can you see? Oops, I'm not supposed to show you that. Let's close that. Can you see the my computer screen? Or if you, thank you. You can shake your head. I got your face there. So if you come to the Canvas website, you can see the general course information, such as a link to my syllabus, my YouTube site, some information about Zoom, including the Zoom invites, which I assume since you guys are here, you got that from my email. Remember, you need to take the plagiarism quiz by, dang it, I thought I changed that. Let me just make sure that this is, there it is, January 9th, the plagiarism quiz. The week 1 lecture, and then some extra credit assignments. Actually, there it is there. Where's the other one? There it is there. EC stands for extra credit, by the way. Extra credit there, study sheet. And then week 1 lab, you'll notice we're doing lab module 00 today. I'll show that in the schedule. And then on Thursday, we'll do lab module 1. There is a worksheet that is due today, worksheet lab 00. Not due today, it's due 8 a.m. On Friday, January 8th. And these used to be together, and so that's why each worksheet's worth 2.5 points. Normally the worksheets are worth 5 points. Any question about any of that? So what I'm going to do is just click that link, but I'm going to run it from my computer, and then talk to you about the lab. Well, let me briefly go over the syllabus. The syllabus does include the lecture and the lab, information about the class, how to contact me, the textbook, and really there is no textbook for the lab. If you do get a textbook, that would be the optional textbook, the Photographic Atlas. It shows you, it's very nice in showing you pictures of, I wonder, I think mine is in at Clark College, so I can't show you a picture of that. But it shows you when we're doing the microbiological tests, which we will do later in the lab. It shows you the pictures of the possible results and the meaning of those results. I've already talked about all of this information, so I'm going to skip down it. Let me remind you that the points for the lab will be generally 1 worksheet per week per lab. There's going to be 2 worksheets this week because we're doing 2 labs in the week, but the first one's pretty easy. There'll be a total worth 50 points. Also in the lab, there's the unknown bacteria. I'm going to give you an unknown bacteria, and then for the rest of the term, you're going to be running different tests on it, trying to determine what that unknown bacteria is. And this will all be done online because obviously we cannot meet in the lab. And then the last project in the lab is the infectious disease research project. You will be given a topic and then do research on it and then do a report, and it'll be worth 100 points. We'll talk more about that when the time comes. And I should mention that the quizzes and the final do have questions from the lab, although most of them come from the lecture. But there will be questions from the lab. Any question about that? A breakdown of the points, 720 total points. The lab being, let's see, 100 for the infectious disease project, 75 for the identification of the unknown, 50 for the lab worksheets. Okay, and then part of the quizzes and part of the final. Any question about that? Let's briefly talk about the microscope use. Microscopes are fragile. You really won't be working with microscopes because everything's going to be virtual, meaning online. But you should know the correct procedure for how to handle a microscope. And then we have several virtual labs in our lab meetings. Not every lab has a virtual lab. Some labs have more than one virtual lab, although there's not more than 3. It's just a fun little activity you can do with the online lesson, and it'll give you some experience for working as if you were in a real lab. Is that clear? It's a virtual lab, but you'll have hands-on activities online, which will be simulating what you would do in a real lab. And that's what the virtual lab is. Now, with that stated, many of the virtual labs in microbiology use Flash, and Flash is no longer supported. So I have to say that if the virtual lab uses Flash, then I have to say it is optional. Now, a virtual lab that does not use Flash is not optional. You must do it, okay? But for the Flash ones, they are optional because Flash is no longer submitted. If you are one of the students who has removed Flash from your computer, you can still do the virtual lab. You click on the link for the virtual lab, and then it'll open in a page telling you that Flash is something no longer working or something, but you can click a link and then it'll work. So you still can do the virtual labs, and it's my hope we're using virtual labs that we did not make ourselves at Clark College. They were made by somebody else, and we didn't steal them. There's no plagiarism. We are allowed to use them, meaning that the individuals made them so that other people can use them. And we cannot convert these virtual labs into a non-Flash virtual lab because we don't have the original file. Hopefully with time, the individuals will convert these Flash virtual labs into another virtual lab not using Flash. But at the moment, that hasn't been done. Okay, any questions about that? I decided to make them optional because they still are very educational, and they give you a little bit of a hands-on activity for actually doing actual lab work, which you can't do online except in the virtual labs. And that's why I've kept them. Any question about that? All right. Support for students, we've already talked about that. Non-discrimination policy, school emergency procedures, you can read about that. Safety for students and physicians. You're not actually going to be in the lab being exposed to microorganisms. Everything we do will be done online, and so you don't really need to perform your work with safe guidelines so that you don't take the microorganisms home and get sick from them, okay? But you need to know about the safety information because you will be quizzed on it. Any questions about that? So read over that. Most of the species we use in the lab will be BSL-1, but a few species will be BSL-2, that means Biosafety Level 2, and you have to use certain procedures with Biosafety Level 2. What you should do is, you should do this anyway whenever you do anything, clean down the surface beforehand, keep things closed when you're not in use, and then when you're using them, obviously they have to be open, but keep them closed when you're done, and then wipe down the surface when you're done. Okay? And then wash your hands before you leave the lab. I've talked about words of advice and comfort, but the lab and the safety rules, read over them because you will be tested on them. Normally you would learn these safety procedures in the lab and you'd have to practice them, but there's no way for you to practice them online. But you will be tested on them, so you should read them over. If you have any questions, please ask me. Obviously I won't get on your case, like if you're putting cultures in the wrong place or disposing of material incorrectly. But this is something you need to do when you would be in the lab in reality. And you only need to know it for the purpose of the tests, the quizzes. Okay? Any question about any of that? Lab coats were required. You must wear closed-toed shoes, not an open-toed shoes in the lab. You must wear gloves while you're in the lab. When you're using a splash hazard, anything that could splash into your eyes, like a liquid culture or bacteria, you must wear goggles. Cleanliness is a virtue, so you should disinfect the lab bench before you ever get started, first thing in the lab, and then after you go. So when you're about to leave, you wash down your workspace, and then when you leave, you wash your hands before you leave and before you begin. Okay. You really don't need to know where the fire extinguishers are, the fire blanket in the lab, because we won't be in the lab. And I'm not going to ask questions about that. Discard of agar plates in the biohazard waste container. It can also be called the autoclave bag. Glass sides and cotton swabs should be put in a glass container containing disinfectant, and the beaker or glass container will say slides or cotton swabs on it. Pipette should be appropriate in the appropriate canister that says pipettes. Glass test tubes. Things should be removed, like tape from the test tube, and then put in their test tube rack in the discard bin. It's not really discard. We will wash those test tubes and then autoclave them, and then they'd be ready for student use. Normal garbage that doesn't have bacteria on it, like paper, I don't know, plastic wrap maybe, it doesn't have bacteria on it, goes in the garbage can. Anything like paper that has bacteria on it, like you clean up a spill or you spilled a drop of bacteria on it, should go in the autoclave bag because it has bacteria. Any question about any of that? And then for the lab, we have our schedule. For today, we're doing Lab 0. That's on laboratory safety. And then on Thursday, we'll do Lab 1, the ubiquity of microorganisms. Remember, you need to do the online plagiarism tutorial and quiz and get that done with 100% on the quiz by 11:59 p.m. Saturday, January 9th. If you don't get 100%, you will get 0 points on the infectious disease project, which is worth 100 points. And you can retake this quiz at least 5 times. I've never had a student who didn't get 100%, although sometimes they have to take it more than once. Any questions about what we're doing? In case I forget to mention, on Thursday, you should read the infectious disease research project for next week. I'll talk about the infectious disease project next week. Probably Tuesday of next week. All right? Next lab will be our last week, where we'll do 2 labs in a week. Lab 2 on Tuesday, Lab 3 on Thursday. Every other week we'll only be doing 1 lab. And some labs you'll only be doing unknown project. Like week 9, you'll only be working with your unknown. All right, any questions about the schedule or the syllabus? Let me mention that the points, 92% or more is an A, 90% or more is an A minus, 88% or more is a B plus, etc. All right, let's start the lab. Oh, I gotta do that. I have to put that up. I haven't put that up on the YouTube site yet. I don't think I have lab. Yes, I do. It's not there though. It's here. Just a minute, I gotta find the lab. I think it's here. Let me point out while that's loading, if you scroll down to the lab, click on this link, there's lab module 00, which I'm going to be showing you, and then there's the worksheet for lab 00. So you open that up, and there'll probably be another link for the worksheet. Click on that to get the worksheet. And it's probably best to download that. So then you can write directly in the document. There's a few questions in it. Fill in the worksheet and then submit it to the appropriate Canvas folder. So question 1, you need to answer rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, rule 4, and rule 5. Answer those. And then question 2, 3, 4, fill in those. And then question 5, they're just telling you submit this file by 8 a.m. on Friday, week 1, in the folder and worksheet lab 00, or you're going to be dropped from the class. I'm going to use this assignment as attendance for those who are attending. Any question about that? Let's quickly go over lab 00. Put that over here. All right, laboratory safety. You're not actually going to be working in the lab, but you do need to know about laboratory safety, as some of these questions will be on the quiz. The primary learning objectives: be able to distinguish between safe and unsafe laboratory practices, understand where the relevant laboratory safety equipment is located in the lab. This one I don't think I'm going to quiz you on because you're not actually going to be in the lab. Understand how to safely dispose of contaminated materials. So you're expected to observe a number of safety rules in the lab because you're going to be working potentially with pathogenic or microorganisms, but because everything's going to be online, it's all going to be done online, so you're not really going to be working with microorganisms, but you'll be pretending to. You must wear a proper lab attire that includes a lab coat, which you button up, covers your lap when you're sitting, your arms, and your torso. You should be wearing disposable gloves. You should have closed-toed shoes on when you're in the lab. When you're working with a splash hazard, you must wear goggles. So you don't have to wear goggles all the time when you're in the lab, only when you're going to work with a splash hazard. And let's say you had one thing you were doing in the lab. If you get done working with a splash hazard, you can then take off the goggles. You must remove these items before you leave the lab. They stay in the lab Everything that comes into the lab stays in the lab. That's to make sure the bacteria that get on them don't go out. With the goggles, we put them under a UV light so that the next student can use them sterilized or at least sanitized. The lab coat, it's washed between terms, so every term it'll start fresh, but it won't be washed until the end of the term. The gloves, you wash your hands and then put on the gloves, and then at the end of the day you remove the gloves and throw them away unless you have bacteria in them. If you have bacteria on them, you should put them in the biohazard bag and then go wash your hands. Long hair should be tied back, no food or drink at any time in the lab, no use of electronics. If you were to take out your phone and use it in the lab, I would take it from you and it would either be submerged for 15 minutes in bleach or put in the autoclave. Either thing will destroy your electronics. No personal items are allowed in the lab. If anything is brought into the lab, it must stay in the lab, and you cannot get it back until it has been autoclaved or submerged and bleached. You can bring in your backpack and like a coat that you're wearing, like if it's raining or cold, and that's store it in the cubby hole. That is not considered part of the lab. It's considered external to the lab. It is inside the lab door, and I don't want to talk much about that because you're not actually going to go in the lab. The point is, anything that comes into the lab proper has to stay in the lab until it has been autoclaved or sterilized and bleached, in which case then you can take it home. Any questions about that? Preparatory laboratory equipment. The hair is tied back, wearing a lab coat, wearing gloves, wearing closed-toed shoes. Clean down your workspace before you begin work, and at the end of the lab, your workspace looks more like that. If you were to go in the lab, obviously. Discard waste in the appropriate place. Anything that has bacteria in it should go in the biohazard. It is a trash can, but we'll call it the biohazard waste. This will be autoclaved, and then the bag will be taken and put in the garbage. But the idea is every bacteria is killed. You do not put anything glass in the biohazard, so it's only plastic and paper and things like that. All glass has another place to go. Report all spills immediately to your instructor and then clean them up. Keep lids on reagent bottles when not in use. Obviously, if you're using it, the lid can be off, but as soon as you're done using it, cover the bottle, especially if there's bacteria in it. No sticking things in your mouth ever in the lab, including fingers, your fingernails. When you're not using something that's giving heat, it should be turned off. Usually at the start of the lab, students turn on the Bacto incinerator, and then before they go, they turn it off, because this takes about 5 minutes to heat up, so you wouldn't want to be turning it on and off while you're in the lab. We don't have flame anymore in the lab, so I'm not going to talk about that. You don't need to know about this. You would if you actually went into the lab, but I'm not going to quiz you on it. You should know where that was. You should pre-read the lab modules before you come to class, and that way you'll be ready to start the lab. Obviously, this first lab is an exception. So the final 2 pages of this document go through the safety rules of working in the microbiology lab at Clark. Safety is important. Don't take shortcuts. Follow the protocol. I already mentioned anything that's brought into the lab stays in the lab. Like if you bring your pen and paper in, that's fine, but it has to stay in the lab. You can't take it out until these have been autoclaved or stuck in bleach. Okay? And then they can be returned to you and you can take them home. I already mentioned about goggles. Nobody can come into the lab without my permission. Books and bags can come into the lab, but we don't call it the lab, and you keep them in your cubby hole. You can bring in food as long as it's in your backpack and closed. You cannot eat or drink in the lab. If you did, let's say you're doing a long experiment and you're waiting for something to incubate for, I don't know, 20 minutes, a half an hour, and you don't have anything to do, you can take off your gloves, wash your hands, get into your backpack, get something to eat, go outside of the lab and eat it. But then you have to come in to the lab, put anything in your backpack, like food that you haven't finished, put it into your backpack, and then you have to wash your hands, put on gloves, and then go back to your lab. Any question about any of that? Oh, and when you leave the lab, you really should take off your lab coat, but I'm not going to be going at that, especially if it's just for something to eat, meaning for a short time. We already talked about cell phones. Cultures are potentially pathogenic. You should keep them covered to keep the bacteria in the culture and not out in the environment. You should monitor yourself for getting sick. I'm skipping over that because you don't need to do that. You should wear closed-toed shoes, wear a lab coat and gloves when you're in the lab. Goggles whenever you're working with a splash hazard. You should clean your lab bench before and after you're done. Report accidents to your instructor. Airtight. Cultures can never go out of the lab, so don't even ask. I won't allow them out of the lab. They should be stayed in the lab. Everything in the lab should be labeled appropriately, completely, with 4 things: your name, the date, the nature of the specimen, and the medium used. You may also put optionally the temperature you're growing it, but everything must have your name or your initials, the date, the nature of the specimen, and the medium used. The reason is so that when we find it, we can realize what it is and what to do with it. If it's something recent, we would probably leave it or put it in the incubator. If it's something old and ancient, we'd throw it away. It should go with your name on it so we know who it goes to, and then the nature of the specimen so that everybody knows the risk of what it is. When you know what the species is, write the species name, like E. coli. When it's something that you don't know what it is, like it's a plate that you've exposed to air, put on air exposure, something like that. So you're saying what the specimen is. You must discard cultures appropriately, agar plates in the with the bacteria in them in the autoclave bag. If it's an agar plate that has no bacteria in it, then it can go in the garbage can, as long as it's closed. Glass slides and cotton swabs in the glass container with disinfectant in it. There will be one for glass slides and one for cotton swabs. I've already talked about this, so I'm going to move on. Supplies are kept for your use at the front of the lab. You don't need to know about that because you're not actually going in the lab. And then when you come into the lab, you should wash your hands. We'll put away your jacket and your book bag in the cubby hole by the door, and then go wash your hands. You should then put on your lab coat, put on your gloves, and if you need goggles, put on the goggles. Okay, and then go to your lab position. When you're done, wipe down the counter. You should wipe down the counter before you begin. When you're done, wipe down the counter before you go. Put away the goggles. Take off the gloves. Take off the lab coat. Wash your hands, and then you may go. Any question about any of that? All right, that's it for Lab 00. So answer the worksheets. I will be here until 7:30 to answer any questions. I think most of you will be done by 7:30. And after that, I will probably log off. But if students are still working, I'll continue the session. Okay, so I'll be here if you have any questions. Work on laboratory worksheet for Lab 00.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
For rule number 2, for after entering the lab, what do you put on to keep yourself safe in the lab? Is that after you do your lab coat and like the goggles?
After you enter the lab, what do you put on to keep yourself safe in the lab?
Because normally don't you put that stuff on before you enter the lab, or am I overthinking it?
Yeah, question 1 and question 2 are similar.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start with something, many of you already said in rule number 1, you put on your lab coat. So in rule
Mm-hmm.
number 2, say something else. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess so. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And Mr. Volpe?
Uh-huh. Yes.
I'm doing the lab exercise right now, and nothing seems to come up. It says, please unscramble the words to make the correct word, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm not seeing any unscrambled words. Is there a way I could like share my screen with you for you to see?
Uh, yeah, there is a way. What you can do, though, is you can skip page 1 and go down to page 2. I've got ignore the above. Here's the lab safety word scramble on page 2.
Yeah, and all I see is like stars, then just no words.
So on page 2, you don't have words?
No, it's all stars.
Okay,
Oh, there's like.
do you have Microsoft Word on your computer?
Unfortunately I don't.
That's what the problem is.
Oh, okay.
Let me see what I've got that you could work with. I might have an old copy. Let me go there.
Mine showed up on page 3. I downloaded it to my.
Okay, that's odd. Take a look and see if you have a page 3.
I only have 2 pages.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right, let me see.
Like some stuff aren't coming up. So I think you're right about me not owning Word document.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you can't open Word. Let me see if I have a rich text format. I think I do, an older version. Just let me look.
Oh,
And I'll make the link available to
So you
you.
want us to do this lab worksheet and it's due Friday, right?
Say again?
So this lab worksheet is due Friday, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Let me look and see. Can you see it in the lab manual? Meaning the lab module 00, is that showing up for you in Canvas?
Lab module.
I'm having the same problem.
So, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Not the, just a minute. Let me look and see if I've got the file first. I'm looking to see if I have a rich text format.
Do you want me to look under week 1 lab?
No, yeah, look and see if you can open the lab module and see if you can read it.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the exercises. I'm talking there it is. I do have an older one. So I'll get that. And let's go back. Modules. I never had problems with students not being able to use Word document before, so I converted everything to Word, and obviously it's a problem for this term. Course files, no. There it is.
I mean, I used to have Word document. I mean, I know I get it for free because I'm a student at Clark. But
Yeah, you should be able to get it for free by just logging into Clark, and then you can get it from, get it from Clark. I'll just word it that way.
Yeah.
So you should be able to get access to it. But I've made for lab exercises 1 increase the indent here. You'll have to refresh your screen. At the very end, let me rename that so it's similar. Read sheet, whoops, that's lab exercises 1. Whoops, I wanted lab exercises 0. Let me see what's on this page. Oh, it has both of them. That's good. All right, so let's change the name of that. All right, so I've made the worksheet available to you. There will be a slight problem. It's a rich text format. It's going to have both 0 and 1 in the worksheet, and you only need to do the first part, meaning for worksheet 0. The second part is for the next lab, which you'll do on Thursday. Okay? So you need to refresh the screen if you don't know what that is. Let me see if I
Yeah,
can.
I did it, and for some reason it's still the same. There's supposed to be scrambled
Yeah.
words, right? And I'm
Try
supposed
to
to.
refresh your screen,
Yeah,
Calvin.
gotcha. Okay.
Let me turn this on.
Like, can you show me what it was supposed to look like? Is that possible?
Now I'm showing you.
Yeah.
So go to your Canvas website,
Uh-huh.
okay? And click on the modules, although Canvas website won't be anything. And then click that button there to reload the current page.
Uh-huh.
And then scroll down to Lab Week 1.
Gotcha.
And then this right here is the worksheet. It's going to be both worksheet for 0 and 1. This is a rich text format, so you should be able to open it.
Yeah,
And,
that's the one I just opened, and it's still the same for me.
no, this is the one I just put here. It's not the one you opened. Here's the one
Yeah,
you opened.
it showed me the lab module 1 and the lab exercise, the module 00.
Click on this link, Calvin. Just do it, please.
Yeah, I did it.
And let me see your screen.
Okay. It's not letting me share my screen. It says host disabled
Just a minute.
participant screen sharing.
Just
I
a minute.
think it is supposed to be kind of like a fill in the blank type of thing.
I did not disallow that. So where is the control for that? Does anyone know where the controls are for stuff?